Is this working? I think so. Okay, and to make my presentation a bit more colorful, I've put some pictures of Jena in the background, since so few people know it. So, what am I going to talk about? Let me just see how I move this forward. So, before I start with what I'm actually going to present, those are most of the people whose work I'm going to talk about in the next 30 or 40 minutes. So this is the fusion group, my group at the University of Jena, or at least large parts of that group, and most of what I present is work done by people from that group. And also, since it's always difficult to fit it in the end, I decided to put the thanks at the very beginning of the talk. Saw it a few times in the last few weeks and thought it's a good idea. So there are the funding agencies, DFG, the German Aerospace Center, and the ARD that pay for our work. There are other projects that you will see that contribute to the work I'm going to present. And of course, there are also the people that actually did the work, and I hope I didn't forget any there. So the title of my talk was something with research data management. So of course the first question is, why do we actually need research data management? Why is it so important? Why do we spend most of our working time trying to improve research data management? And we take our motivation there from a research question, or the motivation I'm going to present here is one of the research questions of IDIF, the German Center for Integrative Biodiversity Research, that we are also part of. And this is not a picture from Jena, but a picture from the tropical rainforest. And one of the questions that IDIF is trying to answer is, why are there so many different tree species in a tropic rainforest, and what does it mean? Is it good that there are so many? What happens if there are not 300 tree species, but just bananas? So why do forests form like that? Why isn't there one predominant species? And what changes if we change the species composition, which obviously is happening right now? Now, if you try to answer that question, it turns out you need a hell of a lot of data. You need data, of course, first of all, you need to know what's growing there. So you need field inventories. So biologists send their students out to count and identify trees. Of course, that's not possible on large areas, that's rather smallish areas. So you need to complement that with satellite data that will hopefully provide additional information on large areas that may not be as precise as the data you collected on the ground. You need information about theoretical distributions. Where can something grow in theory? You need data from experiments where you manipulate climate maybe. You need information about the ecosystem, so temperature, rainfall, whatever else. You may want to know functional traits, so how are these different species that occur here different from each other? You may want information on, for instance, climate predictions, so model output, and you may want to know what did this look like hundreds of years ago, and their data kept in collections may be helpful. And to answer the questions, you can look at all these data separately. You obviously also cannot collect all this data on your own. You must rely on this data, or large parts of this data, being available. So all needs to be integrated, and if that data and the describing data is not fair and of high quality, then there's no chance you will be able to integrate it, at least not with a reasonable amount of effort. And you will only achieve that this is fair and high quality if you look at data management from the very start of your project and not do that as an afterthought at the end. So we do need research data management to be able to answer important scientific questions. and that questions in biodiversity research are important should be clear, not only since the IPBES report published a few months back that stated that 1 million species are threatened to be extinct in the very near future. So we need fair data management, I'm saying. Now the next question is, what actually does fair mean? Who in this room knows what fair is? That is good, that's basically everyone. I gave a talk recently at a workshop of the German Aerospace Center, software engineers there, and there I think 5 people in the room had ever heard of FAIR, much to the surprise of those 5 people that they were the only ones, so I thought it would be safe to put that slide in here and also to put some slides in here on FAIR. So just to recapitulate very briefly, FAIR means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And for the few of you who've not come across FAIR, which is simply a great acronym, whatever it means, it was a strike of genius to come up with that acronym, I think, because who does not want to be fair? So data needs to be findable. That means you need globally unique and persistent identifiers. It means you need rich metadata, and what rich means is defined in the reusability part, and it needs to link to the data and be searchable somewhere. Accessible means you need protocols that allow you to actually get to the data. Interoperable means that you should use a broadly applicable shared language for knowledge representation. You should follow the vocabularies themselves, should follow the FAIR principles, and should link to other data, metadata where necessary, and you want the data to be described with accurate and relevant attributes. You want clear licenses, you want detailed provenance, and this should meet community standards. So that's FAIR. Is FAIR enough to actually achieve good research data management? We believe no, because FAIR does not cover some important aspects. For instance, it does not say anything about the data quality. Yeah? I mean, you need to describe the data quality. Maybe you can interpret the rich metadata in that way, but it doesn't actually tell you to have really great data in there, yeah? Just greatly described data. So that's something else you should, of course, strive for if you do research data management, that the data is not only well described, but also that the data itself does not contain errors, is as complete as possible, and so on. So how do we actually achieve fair data? And how fair is our data? So we took a look at one of the projects that we handle data for, which is a large-scale biodiversity project called Biodiversity Exploratories, which I don't think you need all the information on here. What's important is it's been running for 13 years now. There are currently around 300 people involved, and there's a turnover every 3 years of around 40% of the people. So you cannot rely on knowledge being preserved by the people still being there. People will leave, so you need the data to be self-explanatory. What the project tries to do is they've set up experimental plots in 3 regions of Germany. Those are these red regions here, and in each of those regions there are around 100 plots, 50 in forest, 50 in grassland, with different land use intensity, and they try to find out what actually drives biodiversity, basically, in those settings, across different scales. So to answer these research questions, they need to be able to share the data. They need to be able to use the data that was collected 10 years ago and still need to be able to understand that. They need to be able to integrate data collected in the different regions. They need to be able to integrate data collected by different groups. So there may be one group working on plants, another one working on arthropods, and you want to put that together. And we've developed a data management system to deal with that handles the data, but also a lot of other resources, and we looked at how fair is that, using one of the tools available to do that, which is a bit tricky because the fair requirements are sort of vague, so this may or may not be the true picture. But what you see is we are pretty good when it comes to accessibility. The findable, one could debate, so maybe our data manager was a bit too optimistic here. I think we are rather somewhere there. But interoperability and reusability are not that great yet. And that's mostly because we do not have really machine interpretable descriptions of the data. So what we lack is semantics. So this is one example, and we've also looked at how do others do. This is very recent work, not yet published, currently under revision, or currently just resubmitted to +1 with a minor revision. Joint work with Birgitta from the German Aerospace Center on dataset search and biodiversity research. Do metadata in the data repositories actually reflect what people are looking for? So the first thing we did was we tried to analyze what kind of questions do scientists actually ask for which they hope to find data. And we collected research questions and search questions from a number of biodiversity projects and annotated those questions. We tried to come up with categories and then ask, again, biodiversity scientists to check whether those categories made sense. These are the categories that were identified, and they are very similar to categories identified in parallel work by other people, for instance, Plastido Pfaff from the IDEF. So people are interested in quality, so that's basically what's measured. They want to ask about environments, about organisms, very rarely about persons or organizations, so that's the kind of query where you ask, get me all data points collected by person X, which is, I think, important in collection data. There you have that. You want everything collected by Humboldt or whatever. We didn't have collection, people working on collection data in our set of people that we asked. But this gives you a rough idea anyhow of what general biodiversity scientists might be interested in. And then in the next step, we looked at what do the metadata descriptions of the repositories, of major repositories in this area actually contain. And what you see here are some data sources, GBIF, Dryad, Pangea, Zenodo, and Figshare, and the standards they use. For GBIF, we looked at the data sets only, not at the individual occurrence records. Here you see again these categories. Everything that is yellow is something that has a specific field, so where you can directly search on this specific field and say, I'm looking for an environment with whatever. Yeah? And orange are things that are covered in some more general fields. So in free text, in general descriptions, whatever. So there is a place to put that, but you cannot categorize it as, this is a person I'm talking about. Well, it's not true for person, they all have person. So you see, a lot of it is just available in those generic fields. And you also see, this is the percentage to which fields are filled. That a lot of these specific fields, so there's basically always a person, but there's only seldomly a method, for instance, at least in GBIF, which may be due to the kind of data that the GBIF holds. So overall, the match is not that great. You often cannot categorize, we often do not have the semantic information in the metadata, and we think that needs to be improved to allow data to be really findable, because an experience many of the scientists make is they don't find anything in those repositories, even though they know the data is in there. And many will tell you, I don't even find my own data. So, not good, and really needs improvement. Now the question is, how can we improve that? So what are building blocks that will make data fairer, will make it easier to find, and in particular, interoperable and reusable? The accessibility is not something I would tackle with semantics. But a few of the building blocks that we believe are needed is, well, first, the assumption here being at the Semantic Web Conference, of course, is that semantics is sort of the answer. So what do we need in terms of semantics? So quite obviously, first of all, we need some semantic model. So we need a domain model, ideally. So we are working on tools to creating such domain models. You need, since I mentioned you need to do data management early on in the project, so you need project data management systems that support semantics. And a major issue there is that no one really is interested to provide good metadata. Everyone wants good metadata if they want to reuse data, but no one wants to spend half an hour annotating their own data set and uploading it to something. So what you need are tools that will support you in that, that will ideally automate that as far as possible. And then you need tools that make use of semantics, in particular for finding data. And in the end, I will go in a bit of detail what we do there, and in the end show how in Germany we are currently trying to put all of this together. So how do you build a domain model? What have we done in that respect? So one thing we did was we developed a tool that allows you to take ontologies from a repository, for instance BioPortal, where you often have very big ontologies, but for your specific purpose you are interested in tiny parts of that only. So what we do is we split these ontologies into small parts, and we've come up with a strategy how to do that. You can then enter things you're interested in, and the system will automatically find good combinations of ontology parts that cover the domain you are interested in. We did this in the context of the Aquadiva project to create these key terms. We pulled information out of the proposal, out of existing papers, so got key terms out there to cover the domain, and then tried to use that to create the ontology. It's not completely automatic in this step, but up to here it works very nicely. And Al-Sayed, one of the main developers of this, is somewhere here, so can provide more details in the next coffee break if you're interested. What you need in this step is you need to match, align different ontologies, which is a rather difficult task, as you probably know, and I just want to point you to the biodiversity track at the ontology alignment evaluation, where also initiative where Al-Sayed also is involved, and this is a rather long-running evaluation campaign that has quite a number of tracks, and since the last 2 years also a biodiversity track where tools try to map different ontologies from the biodiversity field, and we hope that with this campaign, tools will be better adapted to maybe specific characteristics of these fields. And there are quite a number of tools that took part in both parts of this campaign. So hopefully one day we will be so far that the precision and recall reached here are so good that we say, yes, we can really use this. And then there may be one problem coming up. There might be inconsistencies in when we put the ontologies that we've picked together. Let's look at an example here. This is from another track of the ontology alignment campaign, where there are conference ontologies, which are always nice as an example because everyone understands them. So assume your mapping tool has found out that paper corresponds to paper and abstract corresponds to abstract. Now if you put this together, you get this thing, which obviously is not great because you've defined abstract as subclass of two things that are disjoint. So your reasoner will tell you that is not a good ontology and you need to somehow repair that. Yeah? This may happen because ontologies are created from different perspectives, and if you put them together you somehow need to reconcile these perspectives, which is difficult to do manually. So one of my PhD students, Samira, has developed a subjective logic-based approach to handling this. And very briefly, the idea behind subjective logic is that given a statement like Edinburgh is a great place, different agents might have different views on that statement. So there might be one agent who has seen this of Edinburgh and says, yes, I quite believe that this is true. If I don't have any information, so atomicity is the null value sort of. I'm not too uncertain, and well, I've probably not seen everything of Edinburgh, so I may also, to a certain degree, not believe that statement. Another agent maybe has seen other things from Edinburgh and thinks, well, I don't really believe this is a great place, but I'm pretty uncertain because I haven't seen much of it. And with subjective logic, you can formalize these beliefs of the agents and come up with how much do I trust the statement, and then you can combine the opinions of the agents and sort of reconcile how likely it is that a statement is true in your merged setting. And Samira applied this to ontology merging. So our agents are the ontologies. They have a view on the world and believe or don't believe certain statements, and then you can combine that and find the axioms in your ontology that are most likely, in your merged ontology, that are most likely causing the problem, or that are most likely wrong and causing the problem. So the workflow is, you have your merged ontology, you run the reasoner. If it's consistent, you're done. If it's not consistent, the reasoner helps you to extract the conflicting axioms. On those, we apply subjective logic and revise, delete, or rewrite the most problematic ones, apply a repair plan, and then test again whether things are working good now. And this works quite well. This is one extract from our evaluation, where we had beforehand asked a number of competency questions, and then first of all looked at, can individual ontologies answer those questions? That's the blue bar in the first two lines. Can a merged ontology that's created by a human answer those questions? or can our automatically and merged ontology, merged and repaired ontology answer those questions? And we did that for a number of questions with differing numbers of source ontologies, and you see overall the blue bars are pretty high for our merged ontology. So first of all, you see that the merged one is always better than the individual ones. Yeah, so you have obviously more knowledge if you join knowledge from different ontologies, so you can answer more questions, you have a more complete view of the domain, and also the tool works pretty well in making things consistent and being able to answer those questions. We also evaluated, of course, other aspects of this, but I don't have the time to go into that here. There was a link to the paper on the slides, so if you're interested, you can look at that. So with that, we have the tools to build an integrated domain model for the domain you're interested in. Now you need something where you can use that domain model, and we developed a data management platform called Bexis2, which is the successor of the one you saw earlier, which is a management platform that tries to support the entire data lifecycle, particularly focusing on these red aspects. It has, I'm looking at the time, I'm going over this a bit quicker. It has the end user features and the admin features you would expect, I would say. It focuses a lot on supporting tabular data, can also deal with other data, and on dealing with heterogeneity. And our experience is that if you prescribe too much, you won't get the data. Yeah? If you force scientists to use a certain schema, they will just keep their data and not put it in your joint repository, so you need to allow them to define their own structures. On the other hand, the more heterogeneous that is, the harder it is to then really reuse and integrate the data. So in Bexis2, we try to sort of align that because we see there's a lot of unnecessary heterogeneity. We looked at the variables used in this biodiversity exploratories, and there are 18,200 different variables. And this is an excerpt of that. If you look more closely, you see that many of them are, for instance, date, and just called slightly differently. Yeah? So we can reduce that to really around 80 different ones, which is quite nice. And we try to do now in Bexis2 to encourage to use similar or to use the same things if you create data sets by providing data structures. So you can define this is a data structure used for soil sampling, and the next person who wants to do soil sampling maybe uses the data structure that's there already because it's more convenient to use something that's there than creating your own one, or extends this or whatever, but with this we get some better interoperability, we hope. We can create templates for variables, so we can say, and those are temperatures, and temperatures have a unit and a data type, or these are timestamps, they have a time and a data type, or this is a ratio which doesn't have a unit and has a data type. And we have a pretty nice user interface where you can pick data structures and reuse and adapt them. What's not in there yet is really semantics. So those are more or less random terms. But of course, we can add semantics there. And again, in Aquadiva, we have extended this. And this is also now part of Bexis2 to be able to provide semantic terms here. In general, this is semi-automatic. The user still needs to do something. The problem is one that has gained a lot of, so the problem how to get semantic annotations is something that has gained a lot of attention recently. This is something we are not involved in, but that hopefully will result in fully automatic approaches sometime in the future. A challenge that was done this year for the first time is ISWC to automatically annotate tabular data to match a knowledge graph, so basically to provide semantic annotation of tabular data. And we're quite looking forward to the results of the next few rounds of this. Now, data alone does not help if you want to describe scientific experiments, or if you want to reuse data produced by scientific experiments. One of the talks this morning already mentioned that you need the lineage, the provenance of data. I think it was the Wikidata type talk. What's the problem with scientific experiments? Well, they are complex. They are not one activity, but several activities. And these activities may take place in the real world or in cyberspace, and you need to keep track of both types of provenance. And of course, there may be different people involved, new technologies may come up, and so on. So you have non-computational parts of experiments, like taking a microscopy image, and you have computational parts, like running a simulation, analyzing the data produced. We've developed an ontology extending Provo and PPLAN to capture this, both the computational and the non-computational provenance of data created in experiments, which is available online, of course. This was created, by the way, in a project dealing with microscopy data and extending the Omero platform, or based on the Omero platform. Here you see an excerpt of this ontology, which does not yet include the OME ontology, but we should think about linking that. It was developed a bit earlier, I think. So here you can capture, you have an experiment, for instance, and that's part of a study, and are people involved, there are instruments involved with certain settings, and so on. And that helps, of course, to capture both what you did in the real world and what you did computationally. In addition, we extended Jupyter Notebook to capture provenance over the course of time, so capture how different runs of a workflow differed, and export that into RDF, and then store that together with your experiment data. So with that, you have the whole provenance of how this data was created, which is often a prerequisite to reusing it. So now that we have the semantic information, or potentially have the semantic information, how can we use that? The first example is from the project I just showed you. There we have a dashboard telling the story of an experiment with the plots, the main characters, the materials used, and what they did over time, where you can go back and see how actually the data was created. Another thing that you can do once you have semantics is, as we've seen earlier today, creating a knowledge graph. You've seen a similar picture earlier, because that picture is taken from the original paper of Rob Page on towards a biodiversity knowledge graph. You may have seen our poster. If not, check it out later on, where we try to extract species co-occurrence data from a database, augment that with additional information, and create a knowledge graph from that. So there are several activities right now, I think, building small parts of this biodiversity knowledge graph, and of course the aim in the end is to combine this. Another important use of semantic information, of course, is to improve findability by improving search results. This is an example from the German Federation of Biological Data, where you have a keyword-based search for something, and it returns you 300 something entries. If you use the semantic search for the same query, you get 1,360 entries. It tells you why you get more, because it included synonyms and subclasses of the concept you used here, and it also tells you in the result why something was chosen as part of the result. Another way you could use semantics is trying to improve the presentation and navigation. And this is recent work done with the DLR, the Aerospace Center. They want to use that to obtain better access to Earth observation data. And what they try to do is use facets and automatically create those facets. So if you have large knowledge graphs, there is a huge number of candidate facets. It often makes sense to use not only direct but indirect properties, so the children of the things we are directly connected with. Things change, so you would need to adapt the facets, and you often want to apply facets to a subset of your complete knowledge graph only, namely the first result of your query, so you can't really pre-compute them. And the need to have dynamic facet definition is, I think, pretty obvious if you've ever looked at Amazon and the facets you get there, which often are not the ones you would like to use now, and are not well suited to the query you just asked. And here the idea is to automatically find the most meaningful facets. And so this is sort of part of a search result, and you could now create as facet, for instance, novel or literary verb or a date, but maybe you want also to go one step further and look for things that are somehow related to the University of Paris. And the question now is, which of those makes most sense? And the workflow that's used here is the following. You get your initial result set as a set of IRIs. You create candidates from those, so you find all the things that are close enough to your input IRIs, remove those that appear only in a small subset of your result, because you don't want facets that only few of your data sets actually contain. You then find among those candidates the ones that work well as facets. So for instance, you want things where you have a reasonable number of different values. If it's too many, it doesn't work as a facet anymore. If it's too few, or if it's too skewed, it doesn't work. So, and based on that, you find facets that are interesting. And now in the next step, this filters some more, and then in the last step, they try to find facets that are not too similar to each other. So if you have, for instance, country and city as facets, that doesn't help as much maybe as having country and genre as facets, because that covers different aspects of your results, and you're likely to want to filter either by one or by the other, but not by both. This works. I haven't included the evaluation again because time is scarce. This works reasonably well. It's way too slow, and we still need a better mechanism to choose these facets that are one step away. Often they are helpful, but sometimes they are just way off, because you can connect or have all kinds of semantics between these two steps. But in general, that's, I think, a quite promising approach to have these dynamic facets to really increase findability in these data portals. So let's see what they come up with in the future. Now, putting all this together, I would like to describe very briefly something that's just starting in Germany. The German government has just decided to fund NFDI, the Nationale Forschungsdateninfrastruktur, which is a very typical German word, goes on forever. It's a national research data infrastructure. They've promised 85 million euros per year of funding for at least 10 years and promised to find ways to make it sustainable afterwards. It's a bottom-up approach aimed to cover all scientific disciplines by building, in the end, around 30 consortia. And the first set of proposals are currently under review, and we've submitted one, so keep your fingers crossed for us. And the one that we've submitted is NFDI for biodiversity, with a rather broad consortium of co-applicants and additional people involved, not from academia, but from state agencies, from societies and citizen science, and from collection data centers, so the museums basically. And the ultimate aim of NFDI for biodiversity, and that's why I'm showing it here, is to build a unified research data commons infrastructure that provides customized semantic access to data, to different data and applications, I must say, to different user groups, so brings basically all of this together. Yeah? Will provide terminology services, will provide integration and true interoperability and reusability of data, and brings together also the German community on that. So for instance, the main group working on the semantics part of this will be Adrian Paschke's group, of which you've seen a presentation this morning, not related to NFDI for biodiversity. And in general, you saw there are many, many people involved there, so we hope to really bring semantics and biodiversity research in Germany forward with that. I'm now skipping the animation since I'm way over time already, and finish, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So, let's see a question over here.
Hi, great talk. I'm Ian Harrow, Historia Alliance. I'm interested to hear your views on when is it fair enough? In other words, I presume you're not striving for perfection on all of what you've described. So what are the bounds? There must be some minimal acceptable level of fairness, and then how do you determine pragmatically how far to take it?
That's a really difficult question. I think linked also to the question, what data do we actually preserve? Do we preserve all? Do we preserve all at the highest curation level, or are there maybe differences? And I mean, I'm a computer scientist, so I cannot really answer that question. I think that's a question that the communities really need to look at, to decide which data is likely to be of high value in the future, where should we put our effort, and which data we should probably preserve, but maybe not spend too much effort in making it completely fair. So I think it's not a technical question, it's a question of the individual communities, and will be probably answered differently also by different communities. So I know that's not an answer, but that's the best I can do here.
It's a question we're all grappling with.
Yep.
You mentioned GBIF at one point, and one thing I always sort of worry about with semantic approaches is the ability to search for things based on keywords and metadata versus the actual data. So in the case of full text, if I'm searching for a paper by the keyword tags or the title versus the actual full text, I think full text is going to win. And with GBIF, you've got some colossally rich data sets, which are described by the EML file you talk about, which is a bit of text and a couple of tags. So no way is it going to capture the richness of the data. So I wonder whether the kind of emphasis on searching for descriptions of the data is going to lose out to a technique which actually searches the actual data in some sense.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question. Can you rephrase maybe?
So if I'm looking for something, I can either look at the description of the thing, or I can search actually within the thing. So within, say, a big rich data set, say GBIF, there's enormous information within that data. If I search that data directly, I could probably do a better job of finding what I want than relying on the external description. In the same way that if I do a full text search, I'll find more likely than if I just search for the description of what's in the full text.
Yeah. So that's also why I mentioned when I showed these results that we were a bit unfair to GBIF because we did not look into the actual data sets, which you do when you search for the occurrence records, which simply was a technical problem. I think the advantage of the description is that it's hopefully structured, so you probably do not get as many irrelevant results because you have the sort of the context. Yeah? So if you do the full text search and you're looking for an author, if that author happens to also have named a species, you will also get all the information about that species, maybe where the name occurs. Or if something is a location and a person name, you will get lots of irrelevant things because you don't know that this occurrence here is not about a person, but about the location. So with the structured description, you avoid that, so you have hopefully more precise results. Of course, in the long run, hopefully NLP tools will help to deal with that and maybe transform these unstructured things into something more structured. And then, of course, you have a lot of data where you cannot look into the data itself because it's image or something else not interpretable directly by a keyword query.
Any other questions? Okay,
I'm also here for the next few breaks, so.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, thank you very much.